The winter gala at Widmore Industries sparkled with all the extravagance money could buy. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across the polished marble floors, and the scent of pine from the towering Christmas tree mingled with expensive perfumes. Eleanor Mitchell stood at the entrance, watching the executives and their guests drift past in their designer gowns and tailored suits. She wore her maintenance uniform beneath a simple cardigan, having just finished her shift cleaning the executive offices. At 62, Eleanor had worked as a janitor at Widmore for nearly 15 years. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her hands showed the wear of decades of honest work. She'd only stopped by the gala to drop off her keys to the night supervisor, but something made her pause at the doorway. Inside, Douglas Widmore III, the company's 45-year-old CEO, held court near the bar. His designer suit probably cost more than Eleanor made in 3 months, and his perfectly styled hair gleamed under the lights. He was known throughout the building for his sharp tongue and sharper ambition, a man who measured worth in quarterly earnings and corner offices. "Ladies and gentlemen," Douglas announced, tapping his champagne glass with a silver spoon. The crowd quieted, turning their attention to him. "I trust you're all enjoying this evening's festivities. The champagne is flowing, the music is delightful, and the company," he paused for effect, "well, the company could use some improvement." Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. Douglas smiled, that predatory grin Eleanor had seen him use before he delivered a cutting remark to someone he considered beneath him. "In fact," Douglas continued, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Eleanor at the doorway, "I think we need some authentic entertainment. Not this pretentious string quartet nonsense. Something real, something from the heart of our company." He beckoned to Eleanor with an imperious wave. "You there. Yes, you in the uniform. Come here." Eleanor's stomach tightened. She'd witnessed Douglas humiliate people before, always under the guise of good-natured fun. Last year, he'd made the male clerk dance for his Christmas bonus. The year before, he'd asked the cafeteria worker to guess the price of his watch, then laughed when her answer was off by thousands. She considered turning and walking away, but something in her, perhaps pride, perhaps simple dignity, made her walk forward instead. The crowd parted, curious eyes following her progress across the gleaming floor. "What's your name?" Douglas asked, though Eleanor had cleaned his office every Tuesday and Thursday for 3 years. "Eleanor Mitchell, sir." "Eleanor. Wonderful. Tell me, Eleanor, can you sing?" She stood there quietly, her work-worn hands clasped in front of her. "I can carry a tune." "Excellent." Douglas clapped his hands together. "Then you'll sing for us. Let's hear." "Oh, what's that song?" "The one they play endlessly this time of year." "Last Christmas." "Yes, that's the one. Sing, Last Christmas, for us, Eleanor." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A few people looked away, embarrassed by the spectacle. But no one spoke up. No one ever did. Eleanor looked at Douglas Widmore, at his smug smile and expensive suit, at the casual cruelty in his eyes. She thought about walking away, about maintaining her dignity by refusing. But then she thought about something her grandmother had told her long ago, words spoken in Portuguese during a summer in the Azores: "Grace is not giving people what they deserve. Grace is giving them something better." "All right," Eleanor said quietly. "I'll sing for you." Douglas stepped back, gesturing grandly to the space before the Christmas tree. "The floor is yours." Eleanor walked to the microphone stand that had been set up for the evening's toasts. She adjusted it slightly, her movements calm and unhurried. The room fell silent, waiting for the embarrassment, the off-key warbling that would give them something to gossip about over their champagne. She began to sing, "Last Christmas, I gave you my heart." Her voice rose, clear and pure and achingly beautiful. It filled the grand ballroom with a warmth that had nothing to do with the heating system. Eleanor sang with the kind of effortless grace that comes from years of singing in church choirs, from lullabies sung to grandchildren, from a lifetime of music offered not for applause but for joy. The smirk faded from Douglas's face. People stopped mid-conversation, champagne glasses frozen halfway to their lips. When she finished the verse, Eleanor paused, then began again. But this time, the words flowed in Spanish, her pronunciation flawless, her voice carrying the warmth of Barcelona summers and Mexican celebrations. "El año pasado te di mi corazón." A few people in the crowd gasped softly. An executive's wife, originally from Madrid, placed her hand over her heart, her eyes glistening. Eleanor continued into a third verse, her voice shifting to French, each word perfectly enunciated, carrying the elegance of Paris bistros and Quebec winters. L'année dernière, je t'ai donné mon cœur. By now, the entire ballroom stood transfixed. Douglas Whitmore had gone pale, his earlier confidence evaporating like morning frost. The fourth verse came in Italian, Eleanor's voice caressing each syllable with the passion of Rome, the sweetness of Sicily, the depth of generations who had sung these sounds before her. L'anno scorso ti ho dato il mio cuore. And finally, she shifted to Portuguese, her grandmother's language, the tongue of her childhood summers and her father's bedtime stories, singing with such love and longing that several people in the audience openly wept. No natal passado, eu te dei meu coração. When the final note faded into silence, no one moved. No one breathed. The only sound was the soft crackling from the decorative fireplace and the distant echo of traffic from the street below. Then, from the back of the room, someone began to clap. Others joined in, and within seconds, the entire ballroom erupted in applause. People stood, shouting, "Brava!" and wiping tears from their eyes. The string quartet members stood with everyone else, applauding a fellow musician. Eleanor stood quietly by the microphone, her hands folded again, waiting for the noise to subside. She wasn't smiling in triumph. She simply looked like someone who had done what was asked of her, nothing more. Douglas Whitmore stood frozen, his face a mask of confusion and something that might have been shame. When the applause finally died down, he cleared his throat. That was, he started, then stopped. For perhaps the first time in his privileged life, words failed him. "Where did you learn to sing like that?" Eleanor looked at him with eyes that held no anger, no resentment, only a quiet patience. "My grandmother taught me the Portuguese. She was from the Azores. My father was a translator at the United Nations before he retired. He spoke 6 languages and made sure I learned them too. The singing," she shrugged gently, "my mother was a music teacher. She always said music was the language everyone could understand, no matter where they came from." "But you're a..." Douglas stopped himself, perhaps finally recognizing the ugliness of what he'd been about to say. "A janitor," Eleanor finished for him, her voice kind. "Yes, I am. I've been cleaning your office for 3 years, Mr. Whitmore. Every Tuesday and Thursday, 7 to 9 in the evening." The crowd had gone silent again, watching this exchange with rapt attention. "I had other jobs before this," Eleanor continued, her tone conversational, as if she were simply sharing stories over coffee. "I taught music at an elementary school for 20 years. When my husband got sick, I took this job because it had better health insurance and the hours let me care for him during the day. He passed 4 years ago." She paused, her voice still steady. "I stayed because the work is honest, and it pays the bills, and because I've learned that there's dignity in any job done well." Douglas opened his mouth, then closed it. Around the room, people who had laughed at his jokes, who had joined in his casual cruelties over the years, suddenly found themselves unable to meet his eyes. "I'm sorry," Douglas said finally, the words sounding rusty, as if he hadn't used them in years. "That was inappropriate. I shouldn't have." "No, you shouldn't have," Eleanor agreed gently. "But you did, and now you know that the woman who empties your trash can speak 5 languages. That the man who delivers your mail has a doctorate in literature. That the lady in the cafeteria who serves your lunch was once a chef at a Michelin-starred restaurant." She smiled softly. "We all have stories, Mr. Whitmore. We're all more than what you see at first glance." She turned to leave, but Douglas reached out, not quite touching her arm. "Wait, please." Eleanor paused. "Would you," he swallowed hard, "would you consider coming to work in our international relations department? We've been looking for someone with language skills and cultural sensitivity. The position would pay significantly more than what you make now." The ballroom held its breath. Eleanor considered the offer, her head tilted slightly. Then she shook her head gently. "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore, but no, I'm 62 years old. I don't need a high-powered job or a fancy title. What I need is honest work that lets me sleep well at night, and that's what I have." "But surely, however," Eleanor interrupted gently, "you might consider offering that position to Maria Santos in the mailroom. She's 28, speaks 4 languages, and she's been taking online business courses at night. She has a young family to support and dreams she's still young enough to chase. Douglas nodded slowly, something shifting behind his eyes. I'll do that, first thing Monday morning. Good, Eleanor said. She glanced at the crowd, at all those well-dressed people with their expensive drinks and their expensive lives. Merry Christmas, everyone. I hope you all have a blessed holiday season. As she turned to leave, a woman stepped forward from the crowd. She was perhaps 50, elegant in a green silk gown. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm Jennifer Chen. I'm on the board of the Community Arts Center downtown. Would you be interested in teaching a class for us? Adult music lessons, perhaps, or a multicultural choir? Eleanor's face brightened for the first time that evening. I'd like that very much. 2 more people approached with similar offers. By the time Eleanor finally made it to the door, she had 3 new teaching opportunities and a dozen business cards pressed into her hands. Douglas Whitmore watched her go, then looked down at his champagne glass. He set it on a nearby table and walked to the microphone. I think, he said slowly, his voice carrying across the silent room, that I owe everyone here an apology. For years, I've confused success with worth. I've measured people by their titles instead of their character. Tonight, a woman I've never really seen, despite passing her in the hallway for years, taught me more about grace and dignity than I learned in 4 years at Harvard. He paused, looking at the faces around him. His executives, their spouses, the board members, the politicians, and the society figures who populated his world. Effective immediately, I'm implementing new policies at Whitmore Industries. Every employee, regardless of their position, will have access to the same health insurance, the same retirement benefits, and the same respect. We're going to start a scholarship program for employees who want to pursue education or career changes. And we're going to remember that the people who keep this company running include everyone from the boardroom to the mailroom. He picked up his champagne glass again, raising it toward the doorway where Eleanor had disappeared. To Eleanor Mitchell, who reminded us all what it means to be human. The crowd raised their glasses, murmuring agreement. Outside, in the crisp December air, Eleanor walked to the bus stop. Snowflakes drifted down from the dark sky, catching in her hair like tiny stars. She thought about the evening, about Douglas Whitmore's face when she sang, about the way cruelty could transform into something like understanding. Her phone buzzed, a text from her daughter. Mom, are you still at work? Want to come over for hot chocolate? Eleanor smiled, typing back, on my way. I have quite a story to tell you. As she waited for the bus, she hummed softly to herself, a Portuguese lullaby her grandmother had taught her so many years ago. The snow fell gently around her, and somewhere in the city, church bells began to ring, calling people to midnight mass. The following Monday, Maria Santos stood in Douglas Whitmore's office, tears streaming down her face as he offered her the position in international relations. 2 weeks later, Eleanor's multicultural choir at the Community Arts Center held its first meeting, with 43 students ranging in age from 19 to 78. In the spring, Douglas Whitmore's mother, visiting from Connecticut, stopped by to watch a rehearsal and stayed for the entire session, her eyes bright with something that might have been pride in a son who was finally learning the lessons she tried to teach him years ago. And late at night, when Eleanor cleaned the executive offices, because she'd kept her janitor position despite the teaching offers, enjoying the quiet hours and honest work, she would sometimes find small notes on Douglas's desk. Thank you cards from employees who'd received scholarships. Photos of Maria Santos with her family at her new desk. Donation receipts to local charities. She never mentioned these things to Douglas, and he never mentioned them to her. But sometimes, when they passed in the hallway, he would nod respectfully, and she would smile, and that was enough. More than enough. On Christmas Eve the following year, Eleanor received a card in the mail. Inside was a simple message in Douglas's handwriting. Thank you for teaching me that grace is giving people something better than what they deserve. Wishing you every blessing this season. Douglas. Eleanor placed the card on her mantle, next to photos of her grandchildren and her late husband. Outside, snow began to fall again, and inside, her daughter's voice called her to dinner. As she walked to join her family, Eleanor hummed that Portuguese lullaby once more, thinking about grandmothers and grace, about languages spoken and unspoken, about the power of one voice raised not in anger but in simple, honest song. The world, she thought, was still full of small miracles and second chances. You just had to have eyes to see them and the grace to offer them when the moment came.